Welcome aboard all. This week I'm chatting with a very special guest, probably I think one of the best modelers going around in the world, Pelle SOEBORG, all the way from Denmark in Europe. So we chat about his modelling achievements over the years, what he's been getting up to and the like. So hi, I'm Darren from Untitled Techniques. Our YouTube channel produces YouTube videos showcasing modelers from around the world. If you know any modelers that may fit the bill, link below, drop us an email. Don't forget to subscribe and like it. Content rolling. Also have a Patreon page that I've just launched. Any little bit counts. I've also linked below. So without further ado, let's get started. Make sure you subscribe. Click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming videos. Support us on Patreon. Like us on Facebook and Instagram at Model Railroad Technique. Welcome aboard, Pelle SOEBORG, and I thank you so much for taking time away from your family this evening or this morning in Denmark to come and chat with us at Model Railroad Techniques.
Well, thank you.
So, Pelle, obviously you can be found, you've got quite a nice Facebook site, and I'll put all the links to this below. So, Pelle SOEBORG Model Railroad site. It's got some lovely photos of your modelling that you're from the last couple of years. So I always Pelle, like to get to know about people's sort of their background in the hobby and how they sort of got interested in model railroading or in modelling in general. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey into model trains?
Yeah, it actually started back in the early 90s where I went to a bookstore, a specialty bookstore in Copenhagen. I don't even remember what I went there for, but while I was waiting in line to pay for whatever I got, I saw this big basket full of model railroader magazines. They sold for nothing. Yeah, apparently, they couldn't get rid of them.
Sure.
And I looked at the cover and was impressed with how realistic it looked. And I ended up buying all of them. And that was actually what got me started.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. So that's quite ironic. Like you started out buying some of those magazines and then you've obviously become quite an author with Model Railroad over the years. I think it's a lovely little backstory into the hobby, isn't it? So so how old do you think you were at that point in time?
Oh, I might have 39, okay. 40 years old or something. Oh, no, I might be, 38, I think I was at the time.
Yeah, sure. So what sort of took your fancy with the American side of things?
That was a magazine.
That was purely the magazines. Okay, lovely.
Yeah, had I picked up a Swiss magazine or British, I would probably have modeled Swiss railroads or British railroads. So that's a coincidence.
Yeah, sure. It's quite. Also, that's why I'm a German modeler and I live in Australia. So I suppose it's that sort of thing. It's what you sort of get exposed to in those formative years of what you start modeling. I suppose it's hence why I'm. It's quite funny. Most of my people on my show I talk to are from my model American, but all around the world. But I'm a German modeler myself, so I just like talking to people about their modeling, their history, and why they've got into trains. And I think it's just some fascinating stories. So you didn't sort of model trains as a kid, as some people have before you, or?
No, when I was a kid, I had a Märklin train like most. Men at my age had.
Yeah, sure.
That was what we all wanted, but I was never a model. I only had a circle of track I could put up on the floor and play with my trains when I wanted to. But I was not a model railroad at all. And when I became a teenager, I lost interest in my trains and sold them. So no, it started when I picked up those magazines.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. So obviously, you're quite a well-published author, quite a number of cow-mount books, and up to a dozen, I think, model railroad magazines at least, I think I've counted when I'm sort of trying to prepare for this interview with you today. So you've done such titles, Done in a Day, mountain to desert and the essential model railroad. What sort of sparked your interest in sort of becoming sort of more of an author as well about our great hobby?
Oh, when I went on my first trip to the US in '92 to kind of, you see, my first attempt in modeling American trains, it didn't go well. So I realized I had to go there and see how it really looked.
Sure.
And I made friends over there at the time, and very good friends, and a photographer who became a very close friend. He took me to all these famous railroad places, and we kept in touch. And that was with old-fashioned letters back then. It was before the internet and all that. And so we sent each other pictures of what the projects we had going. And then I was doing, I think I was a locomotive detailing project or something like that. And then he wrote me back and said, why don't you write a story for Model Railroad about it? I think more people would be interested in this. And I said, oh, I hadn't thought about that before. And I thought, okay, I'll give it a try, and sent them a story and some pictures. And to my surprise, they took it. And to an even bigger surprise, they paid me for it. So I thought, oh, there's something here. So I kind of started sending them articles about what I did, and they took them. So that's how that started.
Yeah, lovely. So what would be probably one of your favorite articles or favorite books, do you think, that you probably wrote?
Oh, I don't know, actually. Of course, I like my latest book about my sectional layout best, because my modeling is better than in my earlier books. But probably, I'll say my very first book, Mountain to Desert, is what I say. It was a pretty big thing for me to have a book published. So my first book, I would say, that's the one I remember most.
Yeah, sure. So I heard you on a previous interview sort of explain one of your first articles. It might have been more words, and then you sort of realised very early on that it was obviously we're a very visual hobby, I suppose. That then you're more concentrated on the photos and the photographic side of things. Can you sort of talk us through a little bit about that concept?
Yeah, because when it actually began with, I received a lot of questions about things they actually could read in my books and articles, for that matter.
Sure.
And but then I realized people were looking at the pictures and the captions, and at least most of my readers did. And I thought, okay, I had to do something more visual about it. So my stories became more based on pictures and captions. My goal was you could actually read the article only by looking at the pictures and reading the captions. If you wanted to go more in depth, you could read this text as well. But
yeah, sure.
But that's how that started.
So most of your offerings are very much how to do. So obviously you have a teaching sort of background. You do that's your passion within our hobby, that you like to sort of pass on your skills to others in that way.
I don't have a teaching background. I run my own graphic design business, so I'm in, you could say, visual communication business. So
right, lovely. So what I suppose a graphic design business is, obviously what you say, obviously you've what you've learnt from that side of things into your hobby. Is that sort of the way you sort of interlink the two, I suppose?
Yeah, but when you work with graphic design, you have to trust your eyes to be. You have to be very self-critic on what you do. So I, of course, do the same thing. If I model a scene and it looks all right to me, I assume it'll look all right to everyone else too. And if it doesn't look all right to me, I also assume it will not look all right to everyone else either.
Well, funny you say that. Probably something that you might not like. I think the rest of us would probably love, because obviously you've taken it to that nth degree. I don't know if you've heard of a modeler out of your part of the world from Germany called Joseph Brandl.
Yes.
He's a professional layout builder from the German region. He's of your ilk, but obviously he does the European type scenery, and he's one of my favourite mentors, I suppose, more than anything, that I love from that. So, do you have any sort of one you sort of look up to, or try to not so much emulate, but sort of take ideas from currently in your modelling?
Not anymore. But when I started reading the magazines, of course, I had. I was what was his name? I was a guy, Chuck Hitchcock, I think his name was, who were modeling a Santa Fe Argentine division, I think it was.
Sure.
I was very impressed with that layout, and there was a couple of others. I don't remember the names now, but one of the good models back then. But I have kind of developed my own style over the years. So
yeah, sure. So what's probably your favourite part of modelling? What do you like? Do you like the design side of things, or the finished product where you can photograph it and show off your work, or?
Actually, it changes. Sometimes I like just laying track because it's so relaxing.
Yeah.
Because you don't really have to think. Your mind wanders while you're just putting down track, and then it becomes boring. And then I like making scenery. And at the moment, because I don't have that much room for my modeling anymore, I don't have room for a layout, so it's just modules now.
Sure.
So I can go more into details, and I'm scratch building small structures. I like that very much at the moment, so it changes.
Yeah. It's quite interesting you say that. I think that's the beauty of this hobby, isn't it? So depending on, doesn't matter how much landscape or real estate you might have to build something, whether it's scratch building. I'm currently love building American craftsman kits, like wooden craftsman kits, but how does that sort of fit into a European layout? Well, I'm still trying to work out how I'm going to do that, but I just love, it's the more of a scratch build, I suppose, than a traditional plastic kit to me anyway. So
yes, and doing the research for I do a lot of research when I'm in the US to have some material to build on when I get back. So
sure.
So
just looking at some of your photos, there's some I've never seen before. Obviously, a lot of the undertakings I've seen in various books that I've got and magazine articles that you've done over the years. They're absolutely amazing photos. So to be commended for the work you do is just gorgeous. Can you sort of talk us through we'll talk about one of your modules, because obviously that's what you're building right now. Talk us through the composition of a scene. What do you start with to build that scene from scratch?
The module I have right now, it was actually meant to be a part of a bigger modular layout, and that was going to be my next project if I still had my training room. So the scene was supposed to fill 3 module sections, but I only had room for 2 of them at where I live now. So I had to kind of compress the scene I originally planned. So I had all the pictures of the buildings I wanted to build for it and everything. So it kind of just, the biggest problem with that scene was actually I had to compress it more than I liked to, but it worked pretty well. So I kind of, it is just a stretch of track. It's nothing, there's not really any switching going on, because the scene represents what you see a lot of in the US in small towns, that the railroad, many of the businesses had been rail served at some point, but not anymore. So that's the scene I'm building. I did build that kind of scene because it's so typical for the US, and I'm not an operator really. I'm a builder, not an operator. So it didn't bother me that it's just a run-through scene.
Yeah, that's fine. That's lovely. So you don't build, what would I would say? You don't sort of represent or copy a real life scene, do you? You sort of make your own scene your own, and then you make it. The realism comes from there. Is that correct?
Yeah, but every structure you find on that's my module. This building exists in the real world, but not in the same town. Some of them are in the same town, but not all of them. But all the buildings exist in the real world. So that kind of gives it more authentic look.
Sure. You also talked about compression just before. So that's obviously, doesn't matter the size of the layout, whether you've got, 2 feet by 2 feet or a whole warehouse to build, there's some sort of compression that goes on there.
Yes.
How do you model that into it to make your scenes look so real?
You need to give structures a lot of space around them, because when you see a layout where everything is so compressed, it doesn't look realistic in my eyes.
Sure.
Anyway. So I value space just as much as I value structures or scenery. I like to, what can you say? Let the elements have room to breathe.
Sure. So very much a less is more sort of methodology.
Yeah, it's a balance. You have to find a balance. Of course, you cannot. I don't even give my structures the space they have in the real world, but I give them a lot more than most models do, and it helps.
Yeah, definitely. So you're definitely a master of that. Some of the scenes you've composed are just out of this world. So just back on some of your photos, is there any particular use a professional camera or an iPhone, or how do you compose your photos?
Well, I have on my later photos, not most of them, but many of the photos in my last book, and all the newer photos on Facebook I take with my iPhone. So, because you can get down so low with it has an off-center camera.
Yeah. Hello.
Perspective.
I love it.
And I like that a lot. And I use a Lightroom app.
Right. Okay.
Because that you can take raw images and you can focus manually. So I stack the photos. I take of the same scene. I take number of photos with different focus points.
Right. Okay.
And then I merge them. So I have the totally. It's the depth of field is perfect then.
So there's that. So it's a new concept to me, this photo stacking. I've just come across that in a Facebook group that I'm a member of. My understanding is it's some sort of software you take 20 or 30 photos or less, and then it makes the photo a lot crisper, because obviously you don't have that blurred background. Everything is in focus.
Yes.
That's basically the methodology behind it. So, okay.
But I don't have that. I think you was referring to Helicon Focus.
That's the one, yes.
But I don't have that software. I actually do it manually, and then merge them in Photoshop. So
okay. Oh, that was my next question on whether you do use Photoshop for some of your photos. That was all. So, yeah. So did you do, like, just back on your publications, did you do a lot, obviously most of the photos for, say, some of the books like Done in a Day, you did all the photos for those as well, or as a
yes,
part of the, okay. Out of
I
interest,
actually also did the book design. So
how long did it take you to put a book together like that, or take you to put a
it
book like
takes
that
a long
together?
time.
Yeah.
It takes a long time. Also because, you see, when I built my last layout, my training room was transferred into a photo studio because you have to prepare everything. When you do something and take pictures step by step, you have to be sure that you don't kind of block the view with your hands and everything. So I just do the series of pictures doing something and see if there's something I have to change position or something before I do it in reality. Yeah. So it takes a lot longer to build a layout that way.
Definitely. I started out my YouTube journey doing how-to videos, and that's nothing to building a whole layout. I'm just takes 3 or 4 or 5 times longer just to build something very simple, because it's got to, as you say, you got to compose it right. It's got to be in focus. So I do empathise with you there, definitely. So, and any special type of lighting that you're using or techniques, like a 3-point lighting or anything like that?
Not anymore, actually. I use the layouts lighting.
Yeah.
I started on my earlier ones with I had some what you call floodlight, big photo lamps that kind of. But you had these shadows that was kind of disturbing.
Yeah.
So now I just use the light tubes I have as a layout lighting, and it's much better.
Yeah, sure. So you have an impeccable eye for the small detail. Some of the things on some of the photos I've noticed, you've built these power poles.
Yeah.
There's something that's modelled that I don't know why I like power poles so much, but it's just one of the first things I saw, because I really love the vertical detail. There's just something about it on a layout. So how did you go about building these power poles? If you know the ones I'm talking about, they got the little transformer on them, and I think you've used
The problem was I have always liked the power poles because that's a thing that's so typical about the US. You have these poles everywhere, so you kind of need them to create the atmosphere of America.
Sure.
But when you look at the commercial kits you can get, they are old. These are old poles. They're actually telephone poles. And they don't use that anymore because everything is cell phones.
Yeah.
So real power poles that you couldn't get. But now with the shapeways, you can get all kinds of 3D printed details. So I used some old poles for the wooden pole, and then all the details with the transformers and the insulators and all that. That's stuff I bought from Shapeways. You can get everything there.
Yeah, it's
for modern power poles.
Yeah, it's lovely. Another sort of, I think, another aspect you model very, very well are sidewalks and roadways.
Yeah.
What's your approach on how some little tidbits that you might be able to let us know or let us in on to make such a realistic looking road?
Well, I cast them in plaster because to me it looks more realistic than if you use styrene sheets or something like that, because they are too uniform. So you cannot cast a surface that's 100% flat. There will always be little kicks and dips and
sure.
So that looks realistic, especially when you kind of give them a dark wash or two after. It it creates little puddles where the street or the walkway becomes more dark. It looks just looks better. It's
lovely.
easy to make look realistic that way.
And I've noticed you do a lot of like other details of the roads that I've seen are not sort of a newish type of road. They're sort of a well-used industrial type road there. They've got cracks and all that through them. So how do you do those type of little details?
Yeah, that's the cracks are easy because you can just scratch them. When you use plaster, you can make little scratches, and when you then give the street a dark wash, then the cracks automatically will become dark. So
yeah, sure.
So that's easy.
For us beginner modelers out there, what would be some little tips for, say, weathering a locomotive? Because it's another strong point of yours, I think. You've written articles on it in Model Railroader, how to go about weathering an American diesel, which you could transform to just about any type of locomotive, except steam, of course. But what's sort of some little advice or tidbits you might be able to give us for that?
Well, I use an airbrush a lot. It's because it's fast, and you almost always need to kind of fade the original paint before you start weathering. And I do that by spraying the locomotive or the freight car, whatever, with white or light gray, thinned to almost a wash. And then after that, I start the actual weathering with I use an airbrush most, and then I do the little details with dry powders.
Sure.
So it's not. I don't. My techniques are not complicated at all.
Yeah. So it's just a less is more sort of building the texture, building the color with various passes of whatever medium you're using.
Yeah, you need to do it. Apply each layer very lightly because it's easier to apply another layer if it's not enough than taking something off again.
Yeah.
So.
Sure. So is there any sort of locomotives you've ever done out there that you think you've gone afterwards, have gone, or I think I've ruined that, or I've gone too far with it, or?
I have had models which which were not so successfully weathered, but then I gave it a second weathering. I just made a more dirty locomotive out of it, and then it worked fine.
Yeah, lovely. So what other sort of advice would you give to, say, a youngster that's starting out there? Whether we'll go to your scenery, because obviously it's another very strong point of yours. What advice could you give someone for scenery? Sort of where to start, what sort of medium to use, what to look out for?
I would say that you have to go and see. If you want to model a specific type of scenery, you have to go and see the scenery, because a surprise for me was when on my first trip to the US, I always imagined a desert would be quite flat, but I realized it's not.
No.
So you have to go and see the things if you want to do a realistic build a realistic scenery. Yeah, so that's the first thing, of course. And then you have to be very picky about the colors you choose. Don't choose too bright colors. Always kind of choose colors that's not too far from each other. So you kind of, things blend in more nicely, and yeah, that's about it, I'll say.
Yeah, sure. I did, I think I read somewhere in one of your articles that just on the colour thing, not to use the too vivid colours. So I think you gave an example of a brick colour or something similar, where I think you mentioned that us as model rowers, we don't have the luxury of sun fading our
True.
paintwork, so to
Yes.
speak. So you're just toning those colours right down to anything that looks more realistic. So
Yeah.
besides using the eyes, any sort of other sort of way you do that, or you just have your sort of a wet palette and you just keep mixing until you get the colour you like?
Yes, I just mix. I mix them on the spot. I don't, and of course I make some samples, color samples, if I want to paint a building, or, for example, the steel bins for that grain facility on my module. Then I make some color samples. I look at them under the layout light to see if, how bright will it look. Because you can be surprised how much white you have to add to your colors.
Yeah. Do you ever sort of, I've done it before, where you might paint something and just let it go off and dry, put it in situ where you're going to have it on the layout, sort of view it, and then come back to it sort of a day later, sort of with a fresh set of eyes to see if that's what the sort of look that you're after?
Yeah, I often do that. Just sleep on it.
Yeah.
and I almost always kind of do adjustments, not the colors but necessarily, but also with other details. And because you have to draw a line, or you see, when you go more into detailing, you still have to draw a line, because you can go crazy in details if you want to. So you have to say, when is this enough to kind of show what I want?
Yeah.
And I'm getting more detail. I'm not on my earlier layouts. I was not a detailer at all. I was not a super detailer, even though people considered me being a super detailer. I was not.
Yeah.
So on my later things, I went more into details.
Sure. So why do you think, is it just something you grew as a modeler that you ended up going to that detail, or you just did more field trips to the United States and observed the detail?
Both things, actually. The more you know, the easier it is to make the correct details.
Yeah.
But also, the cameras are better. You can put your cell phone place it on your layout or your module, and take a picture if you are standing there.
Yeah.
And then you see everything you can say, everything is revealed.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you can't get away with anything anymore.
No, that's right. I know that feeling very much. A few times I've looked at putting some up on Facebook and I take a photo thinking it looks really good until you get it right in that street level and you take that photo and I don't know, the figurine's got a broken foot or something. I don't know. It's just one of a bit of a phrase, but that's quite interesting what we can now do with our mobile phones. That's for sure. Yeah. So,
but that was actually how I started taking pictures of my stuff. It was when I built that first attempt for an American railroad scene. Sure. And there was something wrong with it. I couldn't really figure out what it was. But then I have a friend who is building warships. And when he wants to check the authenticity of his models, he looked at them through binoculars. Because then everything was blocked out, and it was as if he was standing on another ship. And I thought, oh, that's clever. And I didn't have binoculars, but I had a camera. And I started, and it was color slides back then. So when you blew it up on a wall and looked at your modeling, it was very easy to see what was wrong.
Yeah. That's where the composition definitely comes into it, doesn't it? And that fine detail. Yeah. And so, sorry, just having a look through my questions here.
Yep.
So obviously you've developed into, you've touched on the point that you're not really the train guy running. You're more of the diorama trains running through to create the realism. So what is there anything currently on your bench that you're building, or something that you're looking at building in the near future? Or
Yeah, we have. Are you familiar with the Fremo organization in Europe?
Yep, definitely are. Yep.
They have a division that have standards for Fremo US modules, and I'm currently building a double module fitting the Fremo US standards. So that's my winter project.
Right. So that's very similar to the Fremo. More in Australia, we don't sort of have anything like that, but I'm sort of au fait with the American sort of standards, where they might go to a show and have 20 modules that'll get fixed together. Okay, so that's a club you're a member of, or is that how that's
not yet? But
no?
I intend to become a member and maybe take my modules to some of these Fremo events. I don't know, but or I'll sell them. I don't know. I don't have much room, so when I have built these two modules, I either have to have them, or if I want to build something else, I have to get rid of them because I don't have room for anything.
Yeah. So you sold your one of your first layouts to the
I sold the last layout I built. I sold to Train Life in the US.
That's right. That's right. So, and I bet you that's in Utah, I think, is currently now. I was reading.
Yes, it is.
So besides sort of the composition, and what other little tidbits do you think you might be able to give a young modeler to help them out there when they're composing a scene? So do they start maybe on structure builds? Is there any particular structures that to keep away from that sort of that may ruin the composition of a scene, or whether they're too big, too small, or?
Well, I'm not that. I don't know. I think you should avoid kind of spectacular buildings. Go for the common rather than going for not too many fire stations and castles and that. Stick to the common things.
Yeah, sure. So did you find? Okay, I'm an Australian that does German, and you're a Danish gentleman that does American. Do you find that when you go to America and you're looking at inspiration for your layouts or your buildings or your weathering, that you find that you're seeing a lot of details that, say, maybe the average American might not see, just purely because of it's an interest of yours and it's not a mundane everyday locomotive that's going by type scenario?
Yeah, I probably see it with fresh eyes.
Yeah, because
many of the things are new to me. They see them every day, so they don't see it. I think that's kind of a. Also, the buildings I built, they just drive by them and it's just a boring building to them. But to me, it looks like a very good building for a layout.
Yeah, sure. So you're into more scratch building your buildings of recent times, or you're kit bash type person, or?
I think you.
Did you break?
I don't hear you now.
Hello?
Yeah?
Can you hear now?
I hear. Yeah, no, now I hear you, yes.
Okay. All right, let me write that down. 39. Are you more of a scratch building type person, or you're into more kit builds, or sort of more?
I'm a scratch building type.
Okay. So
when it comes to structures, not trains, but structures, yes.
So what do you like scratch build? What's your medium of choice? Is it styrene or wood? Or
styrene. It's the easiest thing to work with, and glue and all that. So yes, I like styrene.
Yeah, lovely. So now, Pelle, I don't have any more questions of you right now. thank you so much for taking time away and speaking to us at Model Railroad Techniques for coming up nearly 45 minutes now. It's been a lovely conversation and a little insight into you as a modeler. As I said, I've probably read just about all of your publications, and I was quite excited when you said yes to come and have a chat with me on the channel. It's been fantastic. So, and I know a lot of Australian modelers over here are a little bit envious that I've got to chat to you today, because they're idolise your work about what you've done, and so freely give away your techniques and how you do things for the betterment of everyone in the hobby. So thank you so much for chatting to me on Model Railroad Techniques today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Make sure you subscribe, click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming videos. Support us on Patreon, like us on Facebook and Instagram at Model Railroad Techniques.